may never know, but I don't believe for a minute that he's been attacked for the reasons they say, and that's because of my experience. So let me preface it that way.
Okay, Susan, let me, just in terms of sound quality, maybe if you could back off your mic a little bit. There's getting some interference. I'm not sure why, okay. But otherwise you're perfectly clear. Just a few sort of interactive things going on with the mic. So,
sure.
So it will help if you back off just a little, but keep the volume at the same level, and hopefully the tech will be able to help that as well. But thank you for that. Yes, I want to go into the Petraeus matter. I have just written an article about that, and I also I'm trying to do more investigations along those lines. It would be wonderful to get your insight, and there's no doubt in my mind that this is quite complex. So it will be fascinating to see where we can go with that. But before we do that, if we could, like I said, sort of start out with your bio from the background of what happened to you and how you ended up in prison, etc.
Sure. I was, for many years, the CIA asset and Defense Intelligence asset covering the Iraq Embassy at the United Nations from 1995 until 2003. I also covered the Libya House. I did the Lockerbie negotiations with Libya's diplomats. I did the weapons inspections talks with Iraq. Though I'm not going to go into all the details of 9/11, my team did give advance warning about the 9/11 attack. We received information from the CIA, and I was ordered to contact the Iraqi embassy and demand intelligence, which Iraq did not possess. But the Bush administration, of course, wanted to pretend they possessed it. So when the government decided to rewrite the history books, and Congress and the war was starting to go very badly. Congress needed to erase the truth of the actions, some of which we'll talk about tonight. And I made a fatal mistake. I went through proper channels, and I requested to testify on Capitol Hill. I contacted the offices of Senator Trent Lott and Senator John McCain, because people say, why did you do that? And it was because I was not doing what Bradley Manning. I was performing in a proper function. I knew the proper procedures, and I was following them. And I asked to testify, and they said, well, what will you tell us? And I outlined the real facts of Iraqi pre-war intelligence, which are very different than what you were ever told. And 30 days later, I woke up in the morning to hear the FBI pounding on my door. I looked out the window, and there were, a dozen men in flak jackets standing on my porch and in my yard. And I was arrested on the Patriot Act, and I became the second non-Arab American after Jose Padilla to be arrested. I was subjected to secret. We'll talk about what that means tonight. It's a frightening story. Okay.
Well, yes, and that's a really short version. It's extraordinary, and you must have, actually I haven't finished your book, so I don't know how you actually got yourself out of jail. So maybe you could cover that.
Well, the reason they put me in, and the way that it ties to General Petraeus, is that the FBI was covering up our team's 9/11 warnings to the Justice Department, and this is very dirty because they were protecting the White House, and they were protecting Congress and the lies invented by the Congress about the weapons of mass destruction, and how it was the story that Congress had a story they wanted to tell the people. It just happened to be entirely false. There was not a single word that was true. Congress denied vehemently that we had ever anticipated the 9/11 attack, and Congress also denied vehemently that the CIA ever spoke up to say there would be no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and to deny that there was any option other than war that would have solved the problem. The reason that was a difficulty, that I was a scapegoat, was that, and it was necessary to destroy me utterly, was that I personally had negotiated a comprehensive peace framework with the Iraqi government. We had the weapons inspections, which everyone knew about, but we also had a number of other very valuable things. We had permission from Baghdad before 9/11 to send an FBI task force into Iraq with authorization to conduct terrorism investigations, interview witnesses outside the province of the government, and to make arrests as required. After 9/11, the Iraqi government tried very hard to give the United States financial documents that would have identified the pipeline, the cash pipeline, feeding terrorism globally. From the Middle East to Indonesia to the Philippines, we would have been able to shut down the money. And if you shut down the money, you don't need a war. You've taken away their operating budget, and you can cramp their style pretty good that way. And the Iraqis throughout the 90s, the Iraqis were one of the best sources that we had on terrorism intelligence. Saddam was obsessive about these people. He was convinced that any jihadi would automatically become a terrorist.
Okay, Susan, I have to interrupt you there. Thank you for all of that, and we'll be right back after this break with Susan Lindauer. Hi there, this is Carrie Cassidy, Project Camelot Whistleblower Radio, and we're talking to Susan Lindauer. Susan, are you there?
Hi, I'm right here, Carrie.
Very good. All right. So where we were at, actually, you were talking right before we went to break, and do you want to complete that thought?
Yes, I just want to explain what the peace option was about, because there was so much more that the Americans, the CIA was demanding from Iraq than just weapons inspections. And so many times people think that there was some ulterior excuse for this war. And so it's important to know what we covered and why, and to understand how the FBI has, in this conversation, I think, how the FBI has been viciously attacking the CIA, and for what purposes. And mine is so loaded with, all these great things that our team was doing that were all good for the United States. I subsequently was accused of being an Iraqi agent. So keep in mind, as you listen to this, when the government decided to destroy my career, I was at the top of my game. I had already done the Lockerbie negotiations. The weapons inspections, you all know, went off beautifully. I negotiated that. I'm the one who worked out the kinks with the Iraqi government to make sure that it would succeed. Everything I had done was superior. Even before 9/11, 9 months before 9/11, we had an invitation for the FBI to go into Baghdad, but the Bush administration refused to send them. And so there's a cover-up. There's complicity with the FBI and the Bush administration trying to hide the failure of the FBI and trying to blame everything on the CIA. It was supposed to be our fault that there was no discovery of the 9/11 attack. Well, that was nonsense. I personally had known about 9/11 since April and May of 2001. I was ordered to threaten I was ordered by my CIA handler to threaten Iraqi diplomats with war at the order of George, that the threat originated above the CIA director and above the Secretary of State. And that was the wording I was told to use. The highest levels of government above the CIA director and the Secretary of State. That's only three people: George Bush, Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld. And that meant that they knew about the 9/11 conspiracy, if you believe that there were hijackings or not. I personally believe that it was a combination, that it was that the airplane hijackings was a cover for the controlled demolition because they needed to maximize the destruction of the towers and guarantee that they could have such a compelling interest is not the right word. They could overcome public resistance, which would be fierce. And they wanted to maximize the impact, the psychological impact of damage to the American psyche, so that they could thrust us into this. The Patriot Act was already in John Hughes' drawer. 7,000 pages that pretty much replicates the Soviet criminal code of 1926 under Joseph Stalin, the KGB network, secret charges. Think about this. Think about what it means to be a defendant. I've lived through this. Secret charges where you're not allowed to know what you are accused of doing. You're not allowed to know the type of crime that you might have committed. They are not required to give you, they give you a general date, but they don't have to be specific. They do not have to tell you what city the crime occurred in. They do not have to give you an address, just in case you were across town or in a different place on that date. They do not have to identify the accusers, secret charges, secret evidence. They do not have to prove the crime ever even occurred. Like if you rob a bank, the bank has a video of the bank robber going into the bank, holding up the teller, maybe using a gun or not, and there's evidence that shows that a crime actually occurred. In the Patriot Act, none of that is required. Not only that, you have secret grand jury testimony, and this is very scary stuff. I was never allowed in 5 years to know who had accused me of what actions. And I was, in fact, I was accused, and your audience will be aghast. My cousin was the chief of staff to George Bush, Andrew Card. He did receive copies of my letters. So did the CIA, and so did Colin Powell. In fact, we had, thanks to the FBI investigation, we had the manila envelope copies. Sorry, we had the photocopies, the bait with Bates numbers on them. That's for legal prosecution. The photocopy of the manila envelope and my handwritten notes to Colin Powell, proving that I had gone to him a week before his speech at the United Nations, telling him that there would be no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and that he should discredit everything the Iraqi exiles were telling him because they were notorious liars. They were trying to engage the United States in their protection as they returned to Baghdad because nobody was going to support them when they got there. And okay, I was totally right about everything I said.
Okay, and once again, asking you to back off a little bit from your mic there because there's some static happening when you emphasize a word.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you. That this is excellent material, and I really appreciate it. As far as the Patriot Act, do you recall that the powers that have been expanded since you were sort of put in jail under it?
Yes. I was sort of a guinea pig for the Patriot Act in the worst imaginable ways. I was locked up on Carswell Air Force Base with no hearing or trial. And I was forced to stay in prison for a year while we fought. We fought it very hard for my release. While I was inside, the government, the Justice Department, urged that I should be detained indefinitely, up to 10 years with no trial or guilty plea, and no hearing, no evidentiary hearing at all. While I was there, my uncle, who is...
I'm sorry. As far as those powers, the expanded powers, were you affected by those expanded powers? I mean, it sounds like they didn't even, I don't even know. I mean, it sounds like they basically treated you as though you were a Guantanamo prisoner, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. The way they got away with it was saying that. Now you just heard what I did. My background and the evidence that was used against me. I gave advance warnings about 9/11. We had the Iraqi peace option. I negotiated the return of the weapons inspections, which went fabulously well. When the Justice Department decided to hide the fact that I had also contacted Attorney General John Ashcroft, his private staff, requesting inside his internal office, going beyond the 800 number on the highway for reporting terrorism. My team had done this work for a lot of years, and we had contact information inside, straight to the top of the Justice Department, in the Attorney General's private office, in the event that something happened and we needed to sound the alarms and try to, because of terror, I was dealing with Iraq and Libya, and maybe there would be a major attack, and I would need to get the information to the top of the government. So I had the proper phone numbers. Well, I used them for 9/11. And I asked for an emergency broadcast alert across all federal agencies. John Ashcroft's private staff told me to give gave me a phone number at the Office of Counterterrorism at the Justice Department, told me to repeat what I just said to them. But later on, when the FBI decided to cover for John Ashcroft, and again, I want you to all to think about General Petraeus right now. When the general, and whatever he's really suffering, because this is a front. I am absolutely convinced this is a nonsense story that they've made up about him having this ridiculous affair. And we can talk about that, why I think it's nonsense. I think it's very silly. I think it's tragic that he is being attacked and his career is destroyed for something so stupid. But I am convinced there's something more that's going on that they are hiding. And the reason I believe it is that I had done these things, and the Justice Department wanted to take away the CIA's authority on terrorism investigations. It was not an intelligence failure that prevented that failed to stop the 9/11 attack. It was a Justice Department decision. John Ashcroft was warned. We asked for his help, and John Ashcroft, head of law enforcement for the United States, refused to take action. And they absolutely were covering for his corruption, his incompetence, his mediocrity. He was out of his league. He never should have been allowed to be the head of the Justice Department. Terrible, terrible leadership. But the FBI wanted that operational authority.
I'm going to throw out a counter to that and wonder how you would approach this. If I told you that I believe John Ashcroft was acting under orders, not being as incompetent as you may think he is, but actually that there was a more diabolical agenda that he was simply following.
I agree with you on that. I consider him to be traitorous. I do agree with you. Yes, that it was a deliberate decision. I have no doubt in my mind. And so when people say to me, Susan, do you think 9/11 was an inside job? I say absolutely. They let it happen and they made it happen. They made sure it would happen. And they did it by the combination of the explosives, demolition, and pulling off the CIA, pulling off the law enforcement and refusing to implement requests for law enforcement help. And I consider it to be, because I suffered on the Patriot Act for 5 years. I was accused of incompetence. They said that they invented a story that I was a religious maniac. Now, I do believe in God, but I categorically deny that I am a religious maniac. That is just, anybody who knows me would know how silly that is. Though I am not an atheist.
Right.
But I do have a strong sense of faith in my life, and I am mindful of the greatness of this fabulous earth and universe, and I'm probably more theistic or deistic. I don't even know what those things mean. However, I am just not a deeply religious person. Well, I do believe in God. So anyway, but they made up this story about me, which the corporate media helped them sell. Amy Goodman, who is of Democracy Now!, when I was locked up in prison, my beloved companion phoned her and begged her to cover my story. And she said, I quote, and he broke down in tears telling me this. He's this big old Navy guy. And he said that she told him, oh, well, maybe it's for the best.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah.
Okay,
and,
I'm very sorry to hear that. I don't want to get into disparaging another radio,
No, I know, but it's a fact.
It is crucial that you get this kind of information out there, and perhaps even we get possibly an apology. I'm surprised that even has she come forward and after the fact. You've written a book. There's lots of evidence that you are who you say you are, and that you were set up, etc. Has she ever sort of come back around and apologized or whatever?
Never at all. The corporate media has been clinging, as we all know, has been clinging to the lies. They made up a story and they backed the administration 1,000%. It was a changing of the guard, as you know, away from, or we've seen through my experience, we see a rise of the blogs and a rise of the internet radio, we see that this media becomes far more valuable and necessary. And so when I hear you doing fundraising, people, listeners out there, you need to support Project Camelot, because if you lose Project Camelot, you're going to never have this information at all, and you need to know what's really going on. All of us need to be a lot more astute, because it's a lot more diabolical and malevolent than even any of us could wish in our worst nightmare that you could imagine what I lived through.
Yeah, there is no doubt about it, and you're one of the people that people should most be listening to, in my opinion, in this regard. Okay, we'll be right back with Susan Lindauer.
Warning. Warning. American. Warning. American Freedom Radio. This habit forming. American Freedom Radio. This habit forming. Use the truth carefully.
Okay, this is Carrie Cassidy, Project Camelot, Whistleblower Radio, and we're talking to Susan Lindauer. And actually, we're just veering into this whole Petraeus thing. I don't know if you're quite ready to go there, but if you are, I've got a number of sort of questions and things to avenues I'd like to go down if you're interested.
Absolutely, I think it's very important.
Okay, well. First of all, let me direct your attention to the fact that I wrote an article. It is on the front page of Camelot. I don't know if you're online or able to see it now, but maybe you can read it later. You will find it of interest. I basically sort of find a number of articles out there. One of the sources on the stories out there comes from a guy named Tom Hennigan, and he is an intelligence asset, as you would call them. I forget which agency he's with. Maybe it is the CIA. I don't know if everything he's saying is straight. There's often disinfo wrapped in with things, as you know.
Yes.
And that's purposeful, sometimes, in fact, to keep the guy alive. But nonetheless, it does appear that where there's smoke, there's fire, in the sense that this situation is a lot bigger than they're letting on. And I'm getting back, I get whistleblower testimony all the time. I am getting back channel information to the effect that, in essence, this is a coup that was orchestrated. And I have to say, it would have possibly been a good coup. In other words, it might have been a group of generals, et cetera, who got together and were planning something to go up against the Bush cabal that is now running this government and has been for some time. And I'm just wondering.
Yes. Keep going. I agree 100%.
Okay. Well, I've actually, I mean, we can really get into it because I've actually been sent some names recently also of some people that aren't even out on the sort of the media at the moment as having been also arrested. And there are a number of people being made to step down. In other words, I'm getting lots and lots of rumblings coming to me. And I have to say, even if this coup fails, I have to say there may be some other ones in the wings because I get information to this effect all the time.
Well, now let me ask you, are they saying that General Petraeus is part of the Bush cabal, or are they saying he's against the Bush cabal?
Well, no, they're saying he would have been the leader of the coup going against the Bush cabal.
That's what I think. That's how I see it, too, yes. That is exactly how I see it. And this might help a little bit, of course, just historical context. The Bush administration had gutted the intelligence community and tried to deeply politicize it so that all intelligence reporting would be affirming the Republican view of the world. And this is anathema to any professional intelligence person. You're supposed to lay it out straight. You have it. It's classified for a reason. You have to be able to give blunt warnings. You have to provide the most accurate details in your debriefings without fear of reprisal. And so you want to have the greatest candor that you can. And under Bush, they punished anyone who even privately put out these reports, privately, confidentially, covertly gave these reports that didn't jibe with what the government was trying to say. So they were definitely politicizing intelligence. And I have seen Petraeus as going back to and also the FBI, and this is very important. The FBI had been taking away the CIA's operational programs. They had been taking over the role performed by the CIA. And under Leon Panetta, he had he'd done a lot of work to restore the morale of the agency, but Petraeus was taking it a big step further, which was to restore the operational performance. And really, the CIA has been rising, I perceive anyway, has been rising rising out of the ashes and resurrecting itself. Whether you like the CIA or not, that's what they've been doing more and more. And I know of some operations that would have been unthinkable 3 or 4 years ago because the CIA was incapacitated. And as you know, and unfortunately, I can't discuss exactly what those are because they're active. But and you don't want to undercut those things. But there's operational, but the operational integrity of the agency has become a threat to the power that the FBI has usurped. And so I think that there's like an obsession with taking out the people who are threatening the FBI's budget, among other things.
Okay, well, let me throw this sort of in front of you and see how you react. I'm getting some back channel information basically saying that there are military commanders and generals, a flag level commander in the Navy, and a staff level general are now in custody of the U.S. military police. And my source on this is very, very good. And there is something to do with a rapid rise in silver and gold, with the dollar at the same time being highly threatened. And it also sort of extends to basically a political breakup of the United States. I mean, we're talking some very serious stuff here. It is. I think it's interesting that you characterize it as something of a war between the FBI and the CIA. I would like to say that the way I understand it is there's a split within the CIA also, and maybe more than one split certainly, but But from what I understand, there are some good guys in the CIA and in a number of agencies, but they are, we call them white hats, kind of lumping them together.
Sure.
But so how do you react to the notion that there may be something
like a real coup, not just a philosophical coup, but an actual military takedown?
Right.
Yeah. Wow. That is that makes a lot of sense to me. The gold and silver and the fall of the dollar and the fear of the breakup of the United States. I perceive that we have some military who are in the military who have taken this oath of service very seriously, who would protect the American citizens at all costs. Enemies foreign and domestic.
Right.
And if we are moving towards a state of martial law, which you see over and over again, Posse Comitatus is in serious trouble. Not only the NDAA, and I'll talk about my experience on the NDAA because I've lived it. I have lived it, and it is a scary thing, and it's scary in ways that you haven't. No offense, Carrie, but your audience just doesn't understand. You think you understand the NDAA. You don't have a clue how bad it really is. But
enlighten us. I'm happy to hear more about this.
Well, let me just tell you that. Let me give you a specific example. My uncle, when I was on Carswell Air Force Base, the reason I was on an Air Force base, there is a private prison, a corporate. Now, here's the thing. Remember that it's corporate. And then we're going to come back, after I explain this, I want to come back to the brand new executive order that has been hushed up by the Obama administration, because there's a brand new order that follows on the NDAA. But my uncle, who is an attorney with 40 years of experience, came when I was locked up, was, bless his heart, great, wonderful man, thank God for him, came to see me to try to save me. And he jumped in. I had a public defender who, I was so poor I couldn't afford a fancy private attorney, but I had a family member who helped me. He came to the base, and first thing the military said, remember the NDAA now, the first thing they said was, Mr. Lindauer, there is no prison on this base, and there is no Susan Lindauer anywhere on our facility. And he said, excuse me, sir, Mr. Sentry, that's not true. I have the papers from the court ordering her to surrender here. Here they are. She's here. And I have letters from her postmarked from your base. Here they are. Take a look. And the military called the commanding officer, who came out, looked him straight in the eye and said, you're wrong. There's no prison here. She's not located here either. Get off our base right now. Leave immediately, sir. My uncle's 70 years old. He's not like a hippie dressed in blue jeans and tie-dye. He's wearing a three-piece suit. And he's a gentleman. He's an elderly, dignified gentleman, and he's a Republican, which is really kind of funny. But he is, he's the type of human being who all of his life has trusted authority. I'm sorry. We'll come back to this, and we'll talk about what happened to get him onto the base. Sorry.
Okay, well, I have to say that what happened to you must have been an eye-opener for him. We'll be right back with Susan Lindauer. Hi there, this is Carrie Cassidy, Project Camelot Whistleblower Radio, and we're talking to Susan Lindauer. We've actually started to go down the road of what is really going on with, Petraeus, what I'm calling a frame, and possibly a frame of other generals as well, what appears to be a coup that was being orchestrated against the Bush cabal. That's the most I've got at the moment, but it is being hidden from the American people. It's kind of amazing. They can have coups go on in our government, and unlike South America that has this go on all the time, our government, the whole thing is secret. It's hidden, and it's hidden under, as usual, a sex scandal, a so-called sex scandal. So this is complete nonsense in my belief, and I have to say that that even if there were sort of sexual relations between the individuals involved, they're all consenting adults, and so fuck it all. They're actually, they should be able to do whatever they wish, and this kind of thing of washing their laundry in public is absolutely absurd, and the American Puritan audience listening to this kind of thing and leaping after that and not paying more attention to what's really going on in their government, and then the media, who are even worse because they should be intelligent enough and educated enough with the political scene to know what's really going on, and yet they lie through their teeth on a regular basis. It's just amazing to me. So Susan, what are you basically thinking along the lines? I mean, we had started.
Yeah, I want to come back to General Petraeus. I'm sorry I got off on the NDAA. You get the emotion from me because I've lived through an attack like this, and the corruption that is necessary to pull something like this off is even now when I relive it in my mind, I get very emotional. So Carrie, I apologize because I lose my perspective when I start thinking like this. But there is a brand new executive order that has been suppressed in the media, and I think that it could be very important. It is that there will be a corporate partnership with Homeland Security to manage resources in the event of martial law. And that is bringing corporations, empowering corporations. We've said that the Supreme Court has said corporations have personhood, and now we're saying that they have rights of government officials to detain citizens, to implement the NDAA. The corporations will be part of the Homeland Security detention program, and that there will be a partnership in there was also a second and third executive order back in, I guess it was March, after the NDAA, when it talked about privatizing, seizing private resources, like seizing food production resources, energy, transportation, and that all of that could be diverted to military uses against the will of the civilians. Well, now they've taken it another step farther. Then we knew that the Department of Homeland Security had come up with a manual for running these NDAA camps, where they would identify ringleaders and activists, and single out the people who would be most influential within the group, who would try to lead dissidents away to resist the NDAA practices in the camp, and they would be put in solitary confinement, and a procedure for breaking their spirit. I have lived through this. I was threatened with forcible drugging with Haldol, Ativan, and Prozac, trying to force me to recant my 9/11 warnings and the Iraqi peace option. At the same time, you, the public, were told that the reason I was being threatened with forcible drugging was that I was a religious maniac, and I was suffering delusions of hallucinations and crazy things. I'm amazed by these things. I don't even know what a hallucination would be, or what hearing voices would be. I have no idea what that's like. I've never happened in my existence that I'm aware of. They tried to say that at one point they tried to say that I was suicidal, but I didn't know it, and that's how they got me into the psychology framework to begin with. And I was like, that's ridiculous. How can I want to kill myself and not be aware of it? That's dumb. I deny it categorically. So I fought back, but the corporate media always was spinning the government story. And that's what they're doing with Petraeus right now. But what you see is that in the past year, we have the NDAA, we have the the executive order on privatization, on seizing private resources. We have the Department of Homeland Security manual, and now you have this very interesting, brand new executive order on the corporate partnership in this new martial law state, where the corporations will be empowered by the government. They will be deputized by the government to impose their will on the people, and that to resist the corporation would be a crime. Okay? And so you have somebody like Petraeus, and I imagine these other generals whom I can tell you already, if they're standing up for America against this kind of thing, I want them in the military. We need them in the military. That they would be resistant to this and fighting against this kind of military, not a military, it's a defense of posse comitatus is what it is, that the military shall never be used as a police to police the people, but shall only be used for protection of the people. And if you have a government that is determined, like an Obama administration that's determined to implement corporate fascism and martial law, then a general like Petraeus, who I consider to have profound integrity, I have tremendous respect for him, though I am anti-war. I know he's obviously a brilliant strategist and tactician. I think he's been restoring the integrity of the CIA and challenging the FBI over and over again. So I could see why they would view him as a threat.
Well, yeah, that's very interesting. The NDAA, the things that you were subjected to that could well be in the future for many people that are out there speaking the truth at this time, myself included, if we aren't careful and don't turn the system around soon, and I mean sooner rather than later. It is fascinating to me that at this time we may actually have a coup going on and the American people be unaware of it. In terms of General Petraeus himself and this person who was the biographer, just out of curiosity, and let me know if I'm sort of veering off too much from your own experience or area of experience, but having been an insider the way you are, you would know that this person, I saw an article that said she was an intelligence asset, and that indicates to me that she's probably an agent, so that she's not quite just the biographer, the quiet biographer. And that does not mean that she's not, a good person or an intelligent woman. On the contrary, and she well could be being framed in this whole maneuver.
I see this as very dirty that they're attacking her. She is not a foreigner. She is absolutely has no attachments to any foreign intelligence agency. That would be the only time a honeypot scandal is where a foreign asset a female asset tries to bait a diplomat and tries to compromise the diplomat so that they can be blackmailed in some capacity, or pillow talk can produce intelligence that will be fed back to the foreign government. That would be a very different situation. I agree with you that Broadwell sounds to me like she was vetted for this job. She was his biographer. She was somebody who he no doubt had multiple individuals vetting her for this task before she was ever accepted. And so to say now that she would have compromised him, I just don't believe that at all. And men and women do. If you've been married for how many years was he married?
Oh, it's a long time.
38 years, if I'm correct. I mean, a man does that. I mean, a woman does that. This happens in normal life. There's nothing scandalous about it. And certainly you don't sacrifice the career of a brilliant general who is leading the CIA just because he has an affair with somebody who's not going to blackmail him anyway. The story that they invented, that Broadwell threatened her rival, that immediately collapses as well. And it also collapses that this Kelly woman had an affair with the general in Afghanistan. It sounds like he was writing letters home. He was lonely. He had a friendly ear, and who can blame him for that? Come on. I mean, and he, again, even if they were, it's really nobody's business. It shows, and he denies it. He denies it. And nothing has ever, so what is the FBI doing reading 20,000 pages of email? Written home by a general to a friend. That's a poor excuse for an investigation. And again, it shows the FBI is out to get these guys. Now, as someone who's done black ops myself, I consider the FBI to be very threatening towards the functionality of the agency. You can be doing something that is entirely beneficial, valuable, supremely valuable to the United States. And the FBI comes in, they want to take over whatever it is you're doing. They want to do it instead. They want to have their budget. Remember, this is bureaucracy and budget. It is who's going to control the sources, who's going to control the running of the missions, who's going to, and they come in and you could easily go to prison for doing these good things. And I don't mean renditions. I don't mean things where you're torturing people or committing crimes against people. That's a different matter. But the things I did were really great things. I was indicted for recruiting an Iraqi in the Mukhabarat who was a former diplomat, and he agreed to act as an informant on terrorists moving around the country. And they actually indicted me for this and said that it made me an Iraqi agent. And I was like, but the guy's going to be helping the United States. What are you talking about? But this is something that is normal intelligence work. It is good intelligence work, and yet they wanted to attack me for getting Iraq's cooperation, and they didn't want the CIA involved in they didn't want the CIA involved in anti-terrorism in Iraq, because the FBI wanted to take it. The FBI is acting like a KGB in the United States, and it's trying very hard to push the CIA out of international operations.
Well, let me back you up 1 second and ask you where Homeland Security fits into this scenario, because in my understanding, they're actually above both agencies.
Yeah, the Gestapo.
Right.
They are Gestapo. And unfortunately, they are privatizing now. They're getting the corporations involved, so they're teaming up to turn the corporations against the American people. And as a partnership, I would never have thought 10 years ago, even when I was going through this very thing, that we could reach an impasse in the United States where this would even be possible. And to be honest with you, if you told me a Democrat was going to do it, I would have told you were insane. I would never have believed it, even when I was locked up in prison. When my uncle told me that he was barred from entering the military base, and that they lied and said that there was no prison, I want you to think for a second of what that is actually like. Imagine the scenario that your family member has been taken away in the middle of the night by somebody who bangs on the door. Get up out of bed. You're coming with us. They throw you in the back of a Jeep, and the last you see is your husband or wife or daughter driving off into the night in handcuffs and shackles with a bag over their head. You go looking in the base. Where is my child? Where's my daughter? Where's my husband? You go knocking on the doors. Hello, is he here? Oh, we don't have a prison here. Oh, no, there's no prison on this base. I have lived that. There's no prison on this base. Your daughter is not here. Not at all. No, no, no. And of course, my uncle, thank God we had a court to go to. Under NDAA, there is no court.
Okay. So ultimately, what you did to get out of prison, how long were you actually in prison? Was it 5 years, or were you just under I don't know, whatever kind of charges for 5 years?
I was in prison for 1 year. The only reason, and everybody who's thinking of donating to Project Camelot, I want you to listen to this. The only reason I was released was that Internet radio, it was not even the blogs, it was Internet radio, began to do interviews with my companion, Jay Fields. And he could not even say that he was my lover. He just said that he lived with me in my house because we had this was a weird intelligence war. After he moves into with me, he got a job at the Pentagon, and then he moved over to the State Department, okay? And he gets a top secret security clearance after he moves in with the Iraqi agent. So the deal was that he would never say that he was my lover publicly. But they knew that he was defending me publicly. And so he forced this on the Internet radio, brought this story to the Internet radio, and that created blowback to get my release.
Okay, Susan, we're going to have to break in here. We'll be right back. Is Carrie Cassidy, Project Camelot, Whistleblower Radio, and we're talking to Susan Lindauer. Susan, I wanted to ask you a question in regard to this whole Petraeus matter, because I understand from something that Tom Hennigan wrote that Petraeus was apparently going to be pointing the finger at the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who has just stepped down, as you may know, for ordering the military to stand down while the Libyan ambassador Christopher Stevens was being assassinated, and that assassination was bought and paid for by the U.S. government or elements in the government. What do you say to that?
I think it's bigger than that. I think that again, I think it's something to hang this on. That perhaps makes more sense than the Broadwell ridiculous love affair, but I think also he would be able to testify about that regardless of Hillary Clinton, and if anything, he'd be a good scapegoat. They could turn that around and make him a scapegoat, so they could hang him for that as well. They could find a way to use that against him, and they're not doing it. I think it's bigger. I think that this has to do I think it's more accurate to say that this is a coup. And the reason it's a coup is that the military is way ahead, is 5 steps ahead of us. The CIA is 5 steps ahead of us, 10 steps ahead of us, and they know very well what's coming down the pike. And they are already resisting it because in fact cases like mine already show the abuses of regular citizens who happen to be intelligence people who've been subjected to these things already, and that we are the guinea pigs for what's going to happen to you. And the military is already sensitive to it at a high level, and they are conscious of they know the master plan that is underway, and they're fighting against it, is what I think is really going on.
Okay, what about the notion that Stevens was an assassination, a planned assassination? I mean, my understanding, I have to tell you, is that based on everything I hear, that the Benghazi situation was fairly orchestrated, that they let that ambassador go down, and that they had a reason for doing it. What that reason is, I don't know. I don't know if you have any background on that, or even if you're going to be at liberty to say so.
Well, I heard that Stevens was heavily involved in arming the Syrian resistance to Assad, and that I heard that he was having dinner with the Turkish consulate right before his assassination, and that the embassy security called in a warning to Washington and said, "Hey, we're surrounded here. We've got hostiles outside our door. What are we going to do?" And they asked for help, of course, and no help came. And then as soon as the Turkish ambassador went out the front door unscathed, unmolested. As soon as he was gone and jumped into his truck and a car and drove away, having discussed financing and weapons supplies for the Syrian militia, the Syrian National Congress and the Free Syrian Liberation Army. As soon as the Turkish ambassador was gone, the rebels, the Al Qaeda fighters, jumped out and killed Stevens. And you know that he was sodomized, right? Did you know that?
No.
I've seen pictures of that. He was.
And what's the significance of that?
Well, I mean, this was an Al Qaeda attack. This was an Al Qaeda attack.
Al Qaeda was created by the CIA.
Of course it was, and it's being funded by the CIA now. I mean, we brought the United States, the Obama administration brought Al Qaeda back to Libya, and now the Al Qaeda fighters have sort of turned on their master, or they're doing their master's bidding. But these are fighters who have been using. They were recruited by the United States, trained by the United States, imported to Libya by the United States, and they work for the United States.
Right.
And so it is a fascinating thing that they should then turn around and assassinate the ambassador.
Right. I mean, look, it sounds to me as though he was more or less a sitting duck. I realized that he was involved in arms, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And whatever that entails, and certainly in the Middle East, you've got different factions with different sort of allegiances.
Yeah.
But you yourself have had quite a background in working with the Middle East, right?
Yeah.
Specifically in Iraq,
Libya.
I guess, but I don't know if other areas of the Middle East. Were you in, other...
Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Syria, Hezbollah, and Egypt.
Okay, so you're in a great position to evaluate this kind of intelligence, so-called intelligence. And I have to say that there seems to be some kind of link that is being drawn to what is called the Omega Fund and the LIBOR scandal. I'm not sure what the links are, and it seems a little, kind of far-reaching, but there's probably something to it. And then there's also, it's being claimed that the Israeli Mossad were the ones that instigated the email hacking attack. I mean, is this anything that you know anything about?
The email hack? No, I don't. I don't know about that. About the email hacking attack.
Okay. Let's say this. You do write for Veterans Today right now, isn't that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you must know Gordon Duff.
Yes.
Okay. And Gordon Duff himself is an intelligence asset.
Who often has disinformation. Who I love dearly, but he is often a source of disinformation too. As he puts it to me, whoever has the best story wins.
Okay, and I appreciate him. I had my conversations with him as well, and I have to say that I think people miss the point. Because they really do attack him in a big way for the disinfo. But I have to say, the game is to figure out the truth, and that when these people put out the real truth, mixed with disinfo as they do in a press rag like Veterans Today, it's still very valuable.
Oh yes.
A piece of truth. It's like a diamond in among a bunch of debris.
Absolutely.
It's incredibly valuable. And
Veterans Today is fantastic. I love Veterans Today. I really do.
Well, I think it's doing something no one else out there is doing. So people have to recognize where what do you say, in a time of deceit? It's an act of courage to tell the truth. Whatever. It's a revolutionary act to tell the truth, I think is the paraphrasing. But at any rate, that's what seems to be happening. But there is something going on here, because now Israel is attacking Hamas. Not that they don't attack them periodically all the time, but apparently this is sort of an escalated attack. and I'm not sure where that goes in sort of with this backdrop in mind.
But here's what's going on a global scale. Israel has launched an attack on the Golan Heights in Syria. So they're essentially drawing Iran into a proxy war with Syria. Because Syria gets its weapons support from Iran. And so they're trying to find another way, a creative strategy. If you can't take the direct route to war with Iran, if you can pull Iran into Syria and then catch Iran doing something that would upset Israel, they can pull us all into a World War III scenario. And then you have somebody like General Petraeus, who is an operational tactical genius, who is getting the CIA back up and running. And he has perhaps a different philosophy on what the military should be doing for the United States. And he may, and I'm giving him a benefit of the doubt here because I do respect him so much, and because I do think this is a coup, that he would be defending posse comitatus. And you have a situation where the Israelis and the Obama administration are trying to open a path to war with Iran, and they know there will be powerful resistance at home when that happens, and they're laying out the whole groundwork where they can seize private assets to use it for the war effort. They can use the corporations, they can deputize corporations to hold citizens in control and have military authority, and then you have somebody like General Petraeus who has the tradition of the military at heart, and you have his other generals who you talk about, who you've talked about, who have been forced to step down or they've even been arrested. And that tells me that somebody is defending the American people, and we may be closer to martial law than you realize. Yes. Or not that you realize, but that the general public you realize it, you get it, but that you do, you know, your audience totally gets it. But I think we're a lot closer than we think.
Yeah, I have.
We may be just a few months away.
Yes, true. Just out of curiosity, you got out of prison. You then pursued your case, I take it, in the courts. Is that right?
Well, they refused to give me a trial. For 5 years, I was held under indictment. What happened was we forced them to release me because they Judge Mukasey, when blowback from the blogs was so powerful that Judge Mukasey, they realized they were not going to be able to do this quietly like they hoped, because the corporate media had now a rival in the blogs and the internet radio. And so they were forced to let me go, but then for the next 2.5 years, I continued under indictment, and every single month they tried to take me back into custody. I was actually forced to go into court with no attorney present to fight a bail revocation. They invented all sorts of ridiculous stories to try to pull my bail. And it was always timed with, big, powerful pushes that I was making in the media. And the more the media covered me, the more the internet media covered my story, when I was finally speaking after my release from prison, I just started talking. I was like, what do I have to lose? I can't rely on other people to tell my story because they don't get it, because it's too complicated. So I went out and started speaking. Every month they tried to take me back into custody. And it became this, my case only ended 5 days before the Obama inauguration. And the irony is that, the Republicans presumed that Obama would be sympathetic to me because I was demanding a trial. But in fact, Obama would have been just as awful, because he's prosecuted more whistleblowers than the Republicans. So I probably would not have been safe under Obama either. And he's the one who's going to implement martial law if it comes to that.
Okay, with your insider sort of access, though, let me ask you, are you not aware of just how far the tentacles of the Bush cabal reach? In other words...
Oh, absolutely, yes. Oh, burrowed in deep.
So insiders in Washington must know that Obama is not calling the shots.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you 1,000%.
Yeah.
1,000%. And I'm going to tell you something right now that I cannot elaborate on. But for example, we have, remember the money that was the Pentagon lost, the $2.3 trillion.
Yeah.
Okay, we have found that money. We know where it is. I know where it is. I know the bank account where it is. I know the bank, and I'm not going to say that who where it is and the names and everything over the radio right now, but I will tell you that we could have had this back 18 months ago, and it's no longer 2.3 trillion. It's more like 10 trillion dollars or higher, which would wipe out the federal deficit.
Right.
Okay? And there's also gold bullion.
Okay.
Tens of thousands of metric tons of gold bullion.
Okay.
And we don't necessarily have a financial crisis, but isn't it interesting that we can't get that money back?
Well, is that linked to the global settlements, or is it being stashed somewhere offshore? Are we talking the Philippines or somewhere else?
Foreign Asia.
Okay.
That's what I'll tell you. Foreign Asia. But you see, we could, and hopefully we will get that money back for America, and then you don't have a fiscal crisis anymore. We can end this crisis without tax cuts. Without tax increases or sequestration. Budget cuts in the Pentagon and the domestic budget, cuts to Social Security. We don't have a crisis. And they could have done this 18 months ago. As of February, and I want to be real precise about this, as of February and March of 2011, the fiscal crisis breaks on the scene in July of 2011. In August of 2011, the U.S. loses its credit rating. It's sterling credit rating. We get dropped down a notch.
Right. No doubt about that. Okay, this is Carrie Cassidy, Project Camelot Whistleblower Radio, and we're talking to Susan Lindauer. Susan, right before the break, I guess we were still going down the Petraeus matter and what was going on with Stevens, the link up to possibly what is going on here in the United States, a coup. Let me ask you this, whether you think that in light of the people, the generals that are being sort of raked over the coals and some of them losing a lifetime of I guess, shoulder insignia and so on and so forth.
Well-earned people, men who are the bravest, the best and the bravest, yes, who earned those stripes.
Absolutely, but in light of that, because these people are being sort of skewered in the media, because the media is so brain dead, they don't look beyond their noses to see what's really going on. Let's say that this situation has legs. As long as they're not in jail, aren't they in a position to still affect change?
Yes, they are in a position, and that's why they're trying to disgrace them and discredit them as much as they can, so that they will be tied up in fighting these ridiculous allegations, and people will be distracted by the what we agree are stupid arguments. I do not believe, honestly, that it's Benghazi. I see Benghazi as a lot of people who oppose the Libyan war, and I was one of them, are throwing out Benghazi, but I don't see that as the crisis that they're saying it is. I think this is much worse. I believe that the generals that they're attacking share two common value systems. One, they are opposed to unnecessary wars with Iran. And Joint Chiefs Martin Dempsey came out powerfully against the war, put his foot down, said, no way are we going into another unnecessary war in the Middle East. We cannot fight this. We cannot win. Our military is exhausted and broken. We refuse. And so they're fighting them. They're fighting back to defend their soldiers. At the same time, on the home front, the Obama administration is getting ready to implement a martial law scenario, and unfortunately, I don't think that is an extremist statement. The fiscal, I see it as a great tragedy. And ordinarily, when people say, "Oh, they're looking for they're setting up a scenario for martial law, they're setting up an infrastructure for martial law," I think that's a conspiracy theorist nutcase accusation. However, it certainly looks that way. They are laying out the groundwork. And then you add in what I know for a fact, because, Carrie, I have the papers in my house. I have been given the papers. I know where the accounts are. We have the money. There is no fiscal crisis. I was given the papers, and I'm telling you this because you are Project Camelot. I was given the papers by someone who is trying to return the money to the feds and has been trying to, for the past 18 months, give the money back. First, unfortunately, he ran into a neocon team. I know who they are. I know the principals who were involved. I know them by name. And they played a game with him and pretended they were going to give the money back. Then they sidelined him and said, well, maybe you don't need to do that. Maybe you could give the money to us, and we could use the money for black ops, for our black bag operations, because it's a private security firm. And so instead of helping him give back the money, because he's trying to do it kind of covertly, he's trying to hide where it has been. I know that. And he's trying to hide who's been helping him hide the money. He's trying to conceal this information so that he is not totally exposed, and his, what do you call them, the accomplices who have aided and abetted in this theft are not exposed. So he's trying to use people who are outside the agency but know how the agency works to give back the money. I've known about this since February, and we have run into the biggest trouble. The banksters have been fighting this. They don't want the money going back to the United States either. And it seems like the most extraordinary thing, because I'm telling you something that it seems impossible, but in the next few weeks, it's going to turn out to have been true, because if necessary, I would go to the media and release the documents. If they don't break down, and if they actually go through with this fiscal cliff, then I promise you this information will be on the blogs. I will put it out there. I've got it. I'll put it out there. There is no fiscal crisis. So who is manufacturing this whole scenario, and for what purpose? And that's the thing you've got to ask yourself.
That gets into the whole sort of Rothschild agenda, New World Order scenario, and we haven't even talked about the Chinese. I would like to draw your attention to the White Hats that do a blog called the Dark Cabal blogspot.com, where they've been releasing on a regular basis documents all about following the money. I wrote a very long article to accompany some of their releases. They've got some very important stuff surrounding something called Pure Heart Investments, which is basically the head of sort of a trading program that the Bush Cabal uses and has used to raise huge amounts of money. You must know about these trading programs.
Oh, yes. Yes. Oh, I do. I've learned about them. Right. Yes.
So let me ask you, because if you want to give documents to someone, I can definitely tell you they're the people to give them to. They've been releasing this kind of thing for quite a while.
Well, first of all, what we're going to try to do, we're going to continue to try to do it a straight way to get the money back to the government. Because this is the type of scenario where I know that the gentleman who's got the money is most afraid of being exposed. So he would prefer to do this in a way that he can stay out of it when it comes out, and that he can hide from public scrutiny. And I know that all of you want that information, and there may come a time when it has to be done. But in my opinion, it's more important to get the money back. And so if he's willing to, if we can eliminate the federal deficit, and that's what I'm talking about, it'll drop by $10 trillion.
But the Fed is filled with Bush cabal. I mean, you know this, right? And it's basically being taken over as we speak, from what I understand, by the Treasury now. Have you heard this?
Yes. Oh, I believe, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And some people are being put in position, I understand from back channel sources, that are honest, but most of those people are basically bought and paid for. And so if you give them the money, I have to say that that you may just, it's very likely to disappear completely.
Well, that is a real concern. This is something that we have been struggling with, to make sure that it really goes to the American people. And that's why I'm willing to, go on record, go on record and tell someone like you, because I know you have a very sophisticated audience, and that's not a platitude. A lot of my feelings about the Patriot Act and the NDAA are very emotional, as you can tell from this interview. And Carrie, I apologize that it's not everything I'm saying to you tonight is distant and objective, because to me it's like this raw emotion of what I suffered and lived through, and having been strip searched and shackled when I was going into court, and Larry Silverstein's attorneys were coming out while they were getting the $7 billion for the World Trade Center, and I was weeping frantically, hysterically, that we knew about the 9/11 attack, and it would have killed his financial compensation. My judge was hearing the same case. So it's everything that I have experienced as a person, on a deeply personal level. And so sometimes I do an interview and I get emotional, and I shouldn't, but it's hard not to.
Okay, Susan, we've got one caller. We've got very limited time. I first want to thank you for your service to humanity. I want to also say to you that if you have such things in your house, I hope you've backed them up and given them in packages to other people, so that there are copies and duplicates everywhere. Because obviously you're a person who has that kind of background. I don't think you would be stupid about this, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if anything ever happened to me, if I was ever arrested or assassinated, they would come out immediately. That's how it's being set up right now, because I am afraid that I don't want to be tagged with stealing money from the federal government, or in any way concealing money when I'm trying to get it back.
Absolutely. Okay, now I'm going to take this caller. Caller, it's area code 443. Sorry we haven't been able to get to other callers. You're on the air with Susan Lindauer and Carrie Cassidy. Oh, wow. Okay, I guess we missed it. The music is starting. Susan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, the caller wasn't seeming to come on the line. I don't know what's going on with that. Please give your, if you have a website, if you have a blog, whatever you would like, name of your book, please do so right now.
Thank you. My book is Extreme Prejudice, The Terrifying Story of the Patriot Act and the Cover-Ups of 9/11 in Iraq. It goes into every terrorism case that we worked on, and the real story of the nightmare of my imprisonment on Carswell Air Force Base. And stay strong, everybody. Stay bold. And we're going to beat these guys.
Okay, thank you so much, Susan. It's been a joy to have you on the show, and let's do this again.